Hello, everybody, and welcome into episode number 23 of the Scholastic Sitdown. We're nearing the end of the road on the 2024-2025 season, but of course, this is the time where the most anticipation is as we have state semifinal matchups for all three levels, girls, red, and combined the three varsity divisions. It is going to be an exciting day here on the Scholastic Sitdown. You're seeing this on a Thursday, 2 days before all those semifinals begin, and my partner Dylan Ward is probably just as fired up as I am, aren't you, Dylan?
Yeah, you know it, Luke. This is our Jordan episode here, podcast number 23, and we've just got a lot to talk about. Looking at all the divisions, quarterfinals, and the semifinals coming up, and a lot of SHL action as well as we've got our final locked in.
And today we'll be talking about, of course, the state playoffs. We're going to recap the quarterfinal scores and then talk about the final four matchups that we have coming up this weekend. Then we'll get to talk to Andrew Schley, who is the head coach of the Bennett Red Wings. Well, you'll see why we'll talk to him. If you haven't seen the score, you'll hear it now. And what a game, quarterfinal game that was. And we'll hint at it now, the longest game of all state playoff games this season. And then we will talk about the SHL final that is now set after last night's matchup between St. Viator and Glenbrook North in Game 3 of the SHL semifinals. Question of the week in trivia, you know it. 23 episodes, I sure hope you do. And from there, that will do it for this episode. But without further ado, let's jump straight into quarterfinal scores. Starting off with the red division, we saw games, four games on Saturday, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And we started with the New Trier Green Trevians taking on the York Dukes. And just as it was last year at the United Center, the exact same score in this one, and also the exact same score in the last regular season matchup between these two. It seems a 6-1 final is common for the New Trier Trevians, who had a four-goal second period to help them get to yet another state semifinal.
Yeah, you mentioned it, Luke. You were on the call for this one on the SHL network, and yeah, it looked like it was going to be a little bit closer of a game after the first period, 1-1 score. You said it, four-goal explosion in the second by New Trier, including goals from Connor Herstrit, William Knight, Harrison Miller, and Keegan Rowian. Jack Herstrit and Dylan Hyman also bookended this one with goals in the first and third, respectively. And New Trier, they're the one seed, and every game is going to be a little bit difficult for them. But when they can find a groove and go off in the second period as they did, they can do what they just did. And you look at their SHL regular season stats, Luke, their goal differential in the second period is plus 35. Second best is plus 12 by GBN. So
My gosh.
something about that second period, they really turn it on.
Yeah, they sure did in this one, outscoring their opponents now in the state tournament by a total of 25-2, trying to beat what they did last year, where they outscored opponents 29-4 on their path to a second straight state title. On to the second game on that Saturday, St. Viator and St. Ignatius met for the seventh time this season, and it did not disappoint, but St. Viator got an early first period lead. Aiden O'Neill, second of the playoffs. And then it was a 2-0 crucial goal from Colton Newhouse. Jackson Steinloff scored shorthanded with 6 minutes to go, but that would not be enough. Both defenses, anchored by Brody Netsky and Brock Hare, two senior netminders, gave us a show in between the pipes for this one, Dylan.
Yeah, Aiden O'Neill, something about the St. Ignatius Wolfpack. He loves scoring against them. He scored in all three games of the SHL quarterfinal matchups, and then he scores here in this one. And it's interesting because, St. Ignatius won game one of that SHL series in overtime, and a lot of people had them on paper to win that series and probably win this matchup as well. But no, St. Viator wins the next two in SHL and wins this one, which is that single elimination. So in the Battle of the Saints, St. Ignatius gets knocked out. And Luke, if you go back to episode number one, St. Ignatius was my pick to win the state championship. So that dream dies right there.
They had a good run nonetheless, and I think one of the questions that arises is, are they playing too much hockey? You see a point in their season where they almost start to die down statistically. And you're talking about a team that at one point was playing in the CCHL playoffs, the SHL playoffs, and gearing up for the state playoffs. It's a lot of hockey. And from a former player myself, when you're going back to back to back, like St. Ignatius was, I know Spencer Montgomery did a good job at still trying to schedule them as far apart as possible, but you're still talking some games on back to back basis. And it's tough. You get to the third period on a back-to-back and you are just gasping for air. But St. Ignatius still battling in the CCHL playoffs. They'll be taking on Bennett in that championship. We'll get into that a little bit later in the outside the SHL segment.
And Luke, I'm going to add on, it's 30 regular season games for SHL, 18 in the CCHL. You do have those three that are double jeopardy between them and Fenwick. So it's 45 regular season games in total. I don't think that is too bad, but where it really bites is in the playoffs
Yes.
because they're a team that has a real chance to win the title in all three postseason tournaments that they're in, SHL, CCHL, and state. And when you have to schedule those games, you have to find when you can get ice. It's not all pre-planned ahead in the schedule. You're in for some really, really tough scheduling situations. And sometimes, I think I remember when they were still alive in SHL and state, they had a stretch of 4 games in 6 nights. And that's not too bad early in the season, but when all of those are big playoff games, that it's really gonna take a toll on your body.
Yeah, and it sure did. And we have one of our two state semifinals already announced so far on this podcast. It will be New Trier and St. Viator. We're going to preview those in a little bit, but let's hop down to the bottom side of the bracket. Right after St. Viator, St. Ignatius, we had yet another one-goal game, and it wasn't your typical one-goal game. Two overtimes, longest game of the season. And in the second overtime, Gianluca Di Cosola with a huge game winner. The Bennett Red Wings down the number two GBN Spartans and the best defense in the state. Crazy one, Dylan.
Yeah, it's not too often that GBN allows 4 goals, and Bennett comes into this one as the only non SHL team in the cut here in the Elite Eight. And GBN took a 2-0 lead early in this one, but then Bennett tied it up by scoring 2 quick goals, separated by, let's see here, looks like just around 36 seconds, if my quick math is right. Hudson Hallwick and Thomas Dusek. Owen Ryle then ties the game up with 3:25 to go in the third. And I think that one shocked a lot of people. A lot of momentum was on GBN's side at this point. And just kind of a fluky goal. Goaltender was screened a bit. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, Luke, in the state playoffs, they actually just changed it this year. So it used to be 10-minute periods of 5-on-5. They'd never go down to 3-on-3, but it was 10-minute periods. Now they decided it should be 17-minute periods. And so the entire first overtime goes by. Some crazy chances. And we're not talking about a boring overtime.
Oh,
This
yeah.
the game could have been over at least 10 different moments throughout both overtimes. That first overtime, nothing happens. They go back to the locker room, clean the ice. Then they come out for the second overtime. And with 6:56 to go in the second overtime, Luca Di Casala scores the game winner for the Bennett Red Wings and an absolutely stunning result if you've been following this season all throughout in the rankings. Glenbrook North, last time they won the state championship was back in 2015. They were a serious, serious contender for the first time since that state championship back in 2015. And at the end of the day, Bennett wins the games. And we say it all the time on this podcast. There's a reason you play the games. Bennett, a non-SHL team, they were ranked seventh. And, unlike the SHL teams that have all played each other, there's no real way to tell where Bennett should fit. They end up being the seventh seed. And after what I've seen from them in the state playoffs, I think that they probably should have been seeded a little higher.
Yeah, and I don't want to go against the Titans at Glenbrook South here, but I think they could have even been a 6 or a 5. I think right after that 5 spot, you talk about that top five that's pretty evened out. Iggy at 5, Viator at 4, Loyola at 3, and so on, GBN 2, New Trier 1. I think right after there, that could have been a good spot for Bennett. But hey, in the end, they don't mind playing the number two team in the state because they beat him in overtime. And just adding on one more thing, you talked about how chaotic that overtime was, and I was driving to a different rink with one of my buddies. I could only work the York New Trier game, and I'm listening in the car, and Anthony Pasquale, our play-by-play guy, is just left and right. Oh, no. It's like every minute there's a good chance. I remember there was one really good chance for Hudson Schlie in the first overtime. He just couldn't lift the puck. But man, his guy still eventually got the win. What a game that was. Some would say game of the year. Maybe most would say game of the year. But
Yeah,
that would bring us to our nightcap. Dylan, anything else to remark on that game?
yeah, before we go to the nightcap, I just want to say game of the year in my book. That's absolutely no doubt. And you talk about how this is the longest game of the A-High State tournament. Also, the longest game of the season, Luke, as this game was 2 minutes of game time longer than the St. Ignatius Wolfpack beating New True Green in the O'Grady Cup
Oh my
Championship
gosh,
way back in
really?
November. So yeah, that one went to five overtimes, but obviously those are all 5 minute overtimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one, I remember I was on sideline and I had it written down at what point it would become longer, and right when it hit that, the game winning goal was scored 2 minutes later.
Wow. Well done, Dylan, because I tell you, when me and you did that O'Grady game back in November, that thing felt like 4 hours of game time.
Yeah.
So good catch there. On to the nightcap, and you did this game as well. Loyola and Glenbrook South. Another game seven, as we mentioned. St. Viator and St. Ignatius met for the seventh time this season, and so did Glenbrook South and Loyola. Very familiar with each other at the end of the regular season, meeting twice, and then going to 3 games in the SHL quarterfinals. And although Glenbrook South got the last laugh in the SHL playoffs, Loyola gets the true last laugh, moving on to the state semifinals, a 5-2 final score. And man, the second period has been huge for teams moving on to the next round. Loyola scores three in the second, and the Titans just unable to claw back, Dylan.
Yeah, and GBS actually opens the scoring in this one with Blake Hoffer on the breakaway.
It's a nice
And
shot.
momentum seemed to really be in the Titans' favor. And Loyola quickly tied it up, Pearson Daverman. And then I think the nail in the coffin for the Glenbrook South was the two goals Loyola scored 59 seconds apart. Peter Lochnicki and Julian Gabal early in the second period made it 3-1. And the Titans just weren't quite able to claw back. And Loyola, they said it in the post-game interview. You talk about, you know, where does the SHL playoffs rank in terms of importance when you compare it to state? And I think we talked to Julian Gabal during the post-game intermission show, and he said, this is a team that took something that really means a lot to us, the SHL playoffs. We haven't missed the semifinals in almost 10 years now, and we wanted to get that revenge, and they did that.
That they sure did, Dylan. And now we move on to the combined bracket. We're going to recap the quarterfinal scores in that one, and then we're going to preview all three semifinals. And in the first quarterfinal back on Monday, the Warriors Hockey Club took on the LZMW Yeti. And boy, have the Warriors been on a run. They beat the D211 Chiefs in the first round 4-0. Then they beat the Yeti 6-0. They are yet to be scored on through two full games of hockey. And the defending state champions are making statements for sure as they move on to the state semifinal.
Yeah, 6-0 is a pretty impressive result. I don't care what team you're playing. If it's a shutout like by that score, it's always going to be impressive. And you look at Warriors goaltender Sean DeValk, he was in net for both of those. He gets the 18 save shutout in this one. But I mean, not too much to say here, but pure domination from the Warriors. They started that first period with 3 goals, outshot the Yeti 15-5, and from there they were pretty much on cruise control, scoring two in the second, one in the third, one of those being a power play goal as well. So they were 1 for 3 on the power play, and you look at only one penalty, and it came in the second period. against the Warriors. So they were staying disciplined and pretty much played just exactly the kind of game you'd want if you're a head coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And just watching them, Dylan, you and I were both at that game and we saw how they moved the puck. I mean, 5-on-5 in the offensive zone, that thing is on a string moving from one player to another. And it almost makes your defense look like you're on a penalty kill. And that's what we saw a lot of time out of Yeti. And if you can possess the puck, especially when you have the lead, it makes things so difficult for the opposition to come back. And the Warriors move on to the semifinal. They will be playing the winner of this game that has already been decided, of course. Chicago North and the D155 Predators. We were both there for this one too, Dylan, and another kind of pure domination game, but I do have a lot of credit to give to the D155 goalie, Logan Mensch, who only saved 25 out of 29, but I mean, some of those chances Chicago North had were like that game could have easily been 8-0, 9-0, another domination game, and now two dominant teams will be meeting in the semifinal between Chicago North and the Warriors Hockey Club.
Yeah, no doubt, Luke, and we were both there. We were talking about that as well. This game probably should have been a little bit more lopsided than the final score, but at the end of the day, 4-0 is always going to be a lopsided score. It's one away from the running clock. And Chicago North, with a balanced attack, they actually go 2 for 3 on the power play in this one, with Luka Roganovic and Aiden Gray both scoring on the man advantage. Aiden Gray, by the way, is fourth goal already of this A-High State tournament. And you look at last game we just talked about, the Yeti upset their opponent in the previous round to get there. Same with the D155 Predators. So it's a 3 seed versus the 11 seed. Not too much pressure was on the Predators. Of course, it's hard to see your season come to an end, but Chicago North has proven in this combined division that they know what it takes to make a pretty deep run into this playoff and hope to get to the United Center. And well, they're one game away from doing that.
Yeah, and they sure look to have things turn in different fashion this year around. You talk about 2 years back, Chicago North losing in overtime to Prep. The next year, they're back at the UC. They lose in overtime to the Warriors. They are going to have some revenge to try to serve to the Warriors in that semifinal game. That is going to be a very highly anticipated game and an unexpected one as well. On the other side of the bracket, we've got the 1-8 matchup that happened between the BGHW Stampede and Lincoln Way, and BGHW just threw half the game, already up 3-0. John Gatta had 2 goals. Colin Lassiter answered back for Lincoln Way, but then Adrian Wisniewski, all-state defenseman, was able to put one in the empty net. And BGHW, kind of in that dominant fashion again, 3 of these 4 quarterfinal games were truly just one team outhandling the other.
Yeah, BGHW ends up taking the shots on goal 24 to 17. If you can believe this, Luke, after 2 periods, the shots on goal in favor of BGHW were 23 to 8. And then in that third period, Lincoln Way outshot them 9 to 2, which was kind of surprising. And one of those 2 shots for BGHW was an empty net goal by Adrian Wisniewski. So Lincoln Way really put the pressure on at the end, but you got to play the full 51 minutes, or in the combined division, I suppose, 45-minute game. And BGHW is the 1 seed at this tournament. And, they're expected to win these types of games, even if it is a bit closer, like the 8 seed versus previous rounds, and they did that.
Yeah, and a nice job on the defensive end too there by Adam Krzyzanowski, who's been taking a lot of the reps. 2 senior goalies for BGHW. They are backed up by some good netminders, and it shows. Then the final game that would give us the confirmation of the semifinals. This one was not one team dominating the other. For example, shots on goal finished even at 29 apiece, but it was Maine who jumped out to a 2-0 lead, eventually led 3-2, and an empty netter by Walker Bruce would secure things with a minute and a second to go. These two teams, of course, very familiar with each other. It was two Rams button heads, the great defense of Maine taking on the great historic offense of the Plainfield Predators. And like they say, defense wins championships, but defense can also be more consistent and win you those games to get to the championship.
Yeah, and Plainfield is a team. In our outside the SHL segment, we've been talking about all season, and the question was always, what is going to happen when we get to this combined division state tournament? Well, Maine has also been a really good team this season, and they're advancing to the semifinals. And I think it's been a while since Maine has made it to this point in the combined division, so good for them. Lots of special teams goals in this one, in spite of not a lot of special teams. Only three penalties in the game. All three of them produce a special teams goal. Power play goal in the first by Walker Bruce of Maine. Power play goal in the third by Kyle Sebastian of Plainfield. And then Maine takes a penalty in the third, and they get a shorthanded goal out of it. Ryan Goff getting the shorty, which it ended up standing as the game winner, by the way, with 7:08 to go in the third period. Didn't break the tie, but it made it 3-1. The final score 4-2. And yeah, just a good, exciting game. I wish I was able to see this one. I was watching a little bit on Live Barn, but just a good game. And as you said, Luke, now we have our final four teams standing in the combined division.
That we do, and we'll get to that now. We'll review the combined division Final Four first, then the girls' Final Four, and then finish off with the red Final Four before we get a chance to talk to one of the coaches in the red Final Four, Andrew Schley. So we already hinted at it, BGHW in Maine. Let's talk about it. You got an all-state forward and Cam Christopher going against another all-state forward and Ryan Goff of Maine. Two teams that I don't believe have met. BGHW has met with a lot of the West teams, and I think they might have met once in the North Central West Cup, but either way, two teams that aren't very familiar with each other, but also near the top of their leagues, and they're there for a reason.
Yeah, and this is where, you look at the state playoffs being at West Meadows Ice Arena for the first time since moving there from the Edge. BGHW is going to be the home team in this one, whether,
Yeah.
even though it's technically neutral site, they're the higher seed, they're going to be on the home bench, and that's going to be a pretty significant advantage. Not just because of their fans, but just because they know the rink. And as the one seed, it does take until these later rounds to play an opponent that is really going to make you sweat a little bit. And I think Maine's going to do that, especially after that performance against Plainfield. And it's just going to be interesting. You've got two guys on each side leading in points. John Gatta, Walker Bruce also leading in goals. And I mean, Maine at this point is putting up 4.5 goals a game in the state playoffs, BGHW 5.5. So this could be a very high power offense game. And I'm really looking forward to this one on Sunday.
Yeah, Dylan and I will both have the call alongside Wes Anderson for that one. Should be a lot of fun, as well as the next game right after. I wouldn't say right after. There's 4 hours between puck drop just to give the ice some time to breathe. But on the other end, it's a state championship rematch. Chicago North taking on the Warriors Hockey Club. Now, of course, the Warriors were called Wabanzi last year, but they still get to carry the trophy case with them. They wore green last year. They're wearing a baby blue this year. Same dominance it seems so far, Dylan.
Yeah, and they what was already a combined team in the Warriors combined again with Wheaton West this year to create this new identity, Warriors Hockey Club. And yeah, you're right, it's been working out for them. But as you said, these two teams met at the United Center last year. Only one of them is going to go back to the UC. You talk about those average goals per game. Chicago North, and part of this is because of their 15-0 victory,
Yeah.
averaging 9.5 goals per game in the A-High State tournament, whereas the Warriors have scored five. And Luke, what's really interesting about this team is both of these sides have yet to give up a goal in this tournament. So whoever scores first on Sunday, that'll be the first goal the other team has allowed. So both teams playing unbelievable defensively and in their goaltending. And man, I am really pumped for this one.
Yeah, it's still crazy to think that Chicago North won a game 15-0. They got two deep teams going at it for sure. Over to the girls bracket, and we have a 1-4 and a 2-3 all chalk, as these two games will be on Monday, March 10th, 6:30 p.m., and then the second game, 8:30 p.m. Of course, all these semifinal games at all levels at West Meadows Ice Arena in Rolling Meadows, Illinois. And first off, let's talk about New Trier and Fenwick. And the way this bracket aligns is pretty interesting because New Trier and Fenwick, the two teams that made it to the semifinals in state last year, but both of them were eventually eliminated by Barrington and Glenbrook. One of these teams will get the privilege to go play at the United Center this time around.
Yeah, and we'll get to the Glenbrook Barrington game, but I noticed that too, Luke. So these are the same Final Four teams, but you've got the
A little
two
bit of a
teams that were at
shuffle.
the United Center and then the two teams that did not make it to the UC. So New Trier and Fenwick, this is obviously a big rivalry in the girls division. You look at Caitlin Dill already 2 goals in this tournament, and again, that's only one game played as they begin play in the quarterfinals. Elise Fontana on the other side also with 2 goals. And yeah, this is going to be a really, really good game as New Trier is going to look to continue their dominance, whether it be boys or girls.
Yeah, New Trier, their girls team top of the Scholastic division in the Metro Girls Hockey League. That's why they got that number one seed. Interesting tiering happened, and Barrington ended up in the Founders division. They end up getting the two seed after dominating the Founders division, to say the least. And they'll be taking on Glenbrook, a team that they have not really met since the tiering round. And as we said, this is the state championship rematch. And unlike the first side of the bracket, where one team who didn't get to go to the United Center will get to go this year. Now it's one team who went last year has a chance to repeat.
That's right. And this is going to be a really interesting game for me because, yes, Barrington is ranked number 2. They were in that Founders division, but they were first place in that, and that led them to their number 2 seed. But Barrington hasn't played a game in a hot minute, Luke. And yes, these girls are double rostered and are playing other games, but they haven't played a game in a hot minute. They were set to play Burlington West in the quarterfinals, but they actually won that game via a Burlington West forfeit. So they actually did not play in that quarterfinal round. So it's going to be really interesting to see how these first few minutes of this one look and see if Barrington can get their legs. And this is a team that's won the state championship 2 years in a row, trying to repeat just like New Trier in the red division. Um, this is not a game that they're going to take lightly here, and I'm interested to see how that first period pretty much looks. See how Barrington gets their legs.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us to what is, drum roll please, our Red Division semifinals. These will be played on Saturday. The first one that we are about to talk about is being played at 1:30, and then that 4 hour break again, just like Sunday will be, plus an extra 15 minutes, 5:45 p.m. puck drop between Bennett and Loyola. But looking up top first, it's number 5 St. Viator and number 1 New Trier Green, a semifinals matchup from last year, where ironically enough, New Trier won 5-1. This year it's a 5 versus 1 seed matchup.
Yeah, and these two teams are now going to meet in the semifinals for the third time in the last 4 years. And if you remember back to 2022, that was an absolute all-time game. St. Viator had a 3-0 lead. New Trier tied it up, and Viator won it in overtime to stun the number 1 seed in New Trier at the time. This is going to be really interesting, Luke, because we talk about how there's probably the most parity this league has ever had this season. And you look at the season series between these two teams, St.
Yep.
Viator took it 2-1.
Yep.
So obviously, when you get to state playoffs, it's a much different animal and a much different approach to these games. But Viator's coming in probably pretty darn confident against a team that they've seen them that they've been able to beat not once but twice.
And on the other end, Bennett Academy, the 7th seed, lowest seed in this tournament, is taking on number 3 Loyola Academy. Battle of the Academies, just as we joke, Battle of the Saints. We got a new name to coin. But how about these Red Wings? They've been well conditioned. 3 straight games in overtime, beating York White, Deerfield, and of course Glenbrook North in that second overtime. They're taking on Loyola, who's found themselves on more of an easier path. 3 goal wins to get them where they are up to this point. 4-1 and 5-2. And Dylan, this is another game where two teams that are in different leagues, you just simply want to see this game because you have no idea what is going to happen. That's what makes this sport so beautiful.
Yeah, and When I look at GBN and Loyola, for me, those are two teams that have a pretty similar style, right? Locked down defensively and don't rely too much on goals. Just play your game, meat and potatoes hockey. So if Bennett was able to beat GBN, I think that they've got a shot against Loyola. I really could see both of the semifinals going any way, but I think right now Bennett is the dark horse in this entire state tournament, and this is a Bennett team that beat Loyola 5-1 earlier this season in the O'Grady Cup, and again, that's not just a practice non-league game; that's a competitive tournament game. So that's definitely worth something, even though that was way back in November, but. We will see. I mean, Luke, I'm gonna have my popcorn ready for both of these Red Division semifinal games.
That we sure are on the scene of West Meadows Ice Arena on what will be a Saturday afternoon and night. Now we're going to get to talk to the dark horse of these Red State playoffs, Andrew Schley. We're going to talk to him about that game as well. A lot to dive into with the Bennett Red Wings head coach. So let's roll it. And here he is, the man behind it all. The 7-2 upset in the state quarterfinals as the Bennett Red Wings took down the Glenbrook North Spartans. Here's the head coach, Andrew Schley. Happy to have you here today, coach.
Hey, thanks, guys. Good to be here.
And just starting off, of course, on what we just saw last weekend, crazy environment, longest game of the state playoffs. What was racing through your head in that overtime, considering you guys were already familiar with overtime games previously?
Yeah, well, four of our last five games had gone to overtime. And
Ouch.
so while it's not comfortable, it was something we were familiar with. So we didn't have the panic, which was great. But as a coach, my back hurt. I'm stressing out inside, trying to stay calm on the bench for the players. But it's a tough situation. And I thought both teams were playing really well. Um, in between periods, I actually said to my assistant coach, these are the kind of things that make high school hockey great. This environment, this type of game. So I felt really good about that. Obviously, I wouldn't be happy if we lost, but I was going to be happy with how we competed and how we played. So it's a little less stressful than it could have been.
Well, in the game, you come back twice. You actually never had the lead until the game-winning goal was scored. GBN goes up 2-0 early there, but you scored two quick goals, I believe a minute or two apart. What did that do in that moment in that second period with, just the bench and the energy and just kind of the belief of, maybe getting a win there?
Right, right. Yeah. I didn't have a problem with our play in the first period, even though we were down 1-0. They were doing the things I had asked them to do. And so I asked them to just stick with the plan, stick with what we had outlined as the path to success. Eventually it paid off for us. And one of the things that's been a hallmark for us this year is the power play. We've had a lot of success with it, and we got a power play goal, and that kind of changed the momentum and the feeling on the bench. We got a little lighter, we started to push a little harder, and things kind of turned around a little bit there.
Yeah, talk about that power play. I remember near the end of the CCHL regular season, you guys were averaging nearly two power play goals a game on average. And just in general, you guys were the only team from the CCHL to be in those quarterfinals and the only non-SHL team. What does it feel, how prideful do you feel to represent the CCHL and now be a team from the Catholic League moving on to take on Loyola Academy in the semifinals?
Yeah, for me, I love the fact that there's somebody else other than the SHL, and the SHL is the cream of the crop, right? Like those are the best of the best. We've tried a couple times to join. It just hasn't worked out for us. But I do think it's important for high school hockey in general to not have all of the best teams in one league. I like that there's another league that maybe can once in a while challenge them. So I felt good about that. And I'm excited for our players to have the opportunity to play against, the best of the best as well. And we've played against New Trier this year. We've played against Loyola and GBS and Ignatius. And so it's not unfamiliar territory for us, but it's certainly a different time of year than when we played before. So,
Well, speaking of the CCHL, not a bad season whatsoever for you guys. So close, one game away to a complete undefeated regular season, right? But you took down St. Ignatius twice, who's, probably the one other team in the CCHL that's, they play in the SHL as well. They're really good. Lots of big wins, large margins. And now you guys are playing St. Ignatius in the Kennedy Cup. What has it been like balancing the state playoffs and the Kennedy Cup playoffs? And especially now that you're in the state semifinals, and I believe game one with St. Ignatius is Wednesday, if I'm not wrong. So
Correct.
what's been all that balancing like?
I mean, it's tough, right? Like you can't look ahead. And so getting the team focused and making sure they're focused on our game Wednesday night first, and making sure that we're not looking ahead to the matchup with Loyola. It's a challenge for a coach, and any coach who's in this position will tell you the same thing. That's not an easy task to get people to focus at what's right in front of you. Um, no, I have nothing but respect for St. Ignatius and what they've done the last few years. And I've had the opportunity to be around some of their players this season, with the All-Star game at All-State Arena and the All-State game yesterday. And they're really good kids. Like I like those guys. So I'm looking forward to playing them. And it's not a like, oh, we hate each other kind of thing. It's a healthy respect. I love what they're doing in that program. I got a lot of respect for what Spencer's been able to do there too. So putting that all together, like at the end of the day, it would be great to have something won this season, right? A Kennedy Cup, something at state. Like that's everybody's goal is to win their last game of the year, and that's what we're shooting for.
Yeah, and talk about last game of the regular season. You guys played Fenwick, were 17 and 0 up to that point. You end up losing that last game by a score of 1-0, but some coaches say sometimes you need a couple of losses in the schedule to really kind of balance yourselves and make sure you get those reality checks. Do you feel like that has helped you become who you are now?
For sure. Sometimes you take things for granted. And I didn't like our approach going into that game. I didn't like mentally where we were at. I think they needed to get a little dose of reality that you had a good season, but nothing's going to be given to you. Everything is earned. And I think that's helped us move forward.
Well, your goaltender, your number one goaltender, Ben Ciesla, just absurd stats in CCHL play. 1.2 goals allowed, 939 save percentage, and how about 53 saves in that double overtime game against GBN? How valuable has he been to your organization?
He's such a great story. He came to Bennett as a freshman, and I actually cut him as a freshman. He was coming in with a broken arm during the spring and summer and recovering for that. And we had a pretty good goaltending tandem at the time. I told him, I'm not going to take you onto Bennett, and I want you to go somewhere where you can play every day. Well, he went and played for Hinsdale Central, and he lit it up as a freshman. He was fantastic. And he's come back and just been a great goaltender for us. Not only is he a great goaltender, he's such a positive presence for us outside of just playing. He's encouraging, he's helping other guys, and he's been a great mentor to Joel Kane, our sophomore goaltender that's also on varsity. And along with Ava Christensen, who's going to go off and play D3 in college, like it's been a great goaltending group to have for the last couple of years. But man, Ben has really been the rock for the last few playoff games.
Yeah, and obviously, we weren't going to go without highlighting this other player, Hudson Schlie. Your son is an all-state player this year. He was incredible last year as well. What's it been like just really having that awesome experience of getting to coach your kid and see him progress at such a great level?
And so fun. I mean, what an opportunity for him, right? Like, it could be really bad playing for your dad, and I'm not an easy coach, and I'm sure he'll be the first one to tell you that. Like, success doesn't come without some sacrifices, and I probably made him sacrifice more than others. That's the burden you bear as being the coach's kid. And I got some great advice from St. Rita's coach, years ago when he was coaching his son and gave me some advice to just treat him like everybody else. And we do our best to make sure that that's what we do. But, nobody works harder than that guy. Like, I mean, on the ice, off the ice, comes home and he's watching video, he's working out and stretching and doing all the things you got to do to be successful night in and night out. And he's happy to take the attention from the other team if that means we can win games and other people can score goals. And I look at our last few games, and while everyone wants to focus on Hudson, and they should, because if you let him free, he's going to do something. But if our other players continue to step up with like four different goal scorers in our last game, five different goal scorers game before that, it's been a great experience for him to learn how to lead and be a part of that.
All right, well, last question on my behalf. You are playing Loyola this Saturday in the semifinal. I know you played them at least once in that O'Grady Cup tournament. I believe final score is 5-1. Not sure if you've seen them any other points this season, but how valuable is it to have that game played against them? And it's not just a non-league game. It was a competitive game in a tournament. So, anything you learn from that game that is going to help you on Saturday?
Well, it's always great to play them. I have a huge respect for DJ and what he's done with that program over the years. I consider him one of my hockey friends. He's just a great guy. And I take a little bit away from that game only because their football team was in the state championship game. They had other distractions, and I don't know that we really got their best team that day, given all the things that go into high school and around that time of year, and we haven't played them since. I know they're a great team. My Hudson played with Matt Klein, their all-star defenseman growing up, and so I love that guy too. Got to say a couple words to him yesterday. It's going to be a battle to the end. They're well coached. They got a ton of skill. Great goaltending. I mean, it could be another instant classic, but let's not go to double overtime.
Who knows what the run you guys have already had? And coach, just want to say thank you. We're not going to keep you any longer because you got a busy week. As we mentioned, Kenny Cup and the state semifinals later on Saturday. So good luck with that, coach, and thank you for joining us today.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very
Thank
much.
you.
See you.
Big thank you to Andrew Schley for joining this episode of the Scholastic Sit Down. Always nice to have a coach on. I mean, they obviously really know what they're talking about. The last two coaches we've had, Dylan, have been John Sclafani, who's still very busy, both of his teams still in league or state playoffs, and Andrew Schley, who, what a cool story that is. Getting to coach your kid, and not only that, sometimes the coach's kid is looked at somebody who is not as good as just on the team and to be on the team. Hudson Schlie is in all state selection, so I'd have to say otherwise.
Absolutely.
And with that, let's talk outside the SHL. League finals are wrapping up. We already talked about the North Central, where BGHW swept Evanston. And in the West, that semifinal matchup we're getting in the combined division is a matchup of the North Central champion versus the West champion. Maine sweeps OPRF 2-0 in that championship series, and they win the McKee Cup in the West Division. Over in the Chicago Catholic League, the championship is set and has already played one game between the Bennett Red Wings, who are still, of course, in the state playoffs. We just talked to Andrew Schley. His team losing game one just yesterday on March 5th, 4-1 win for the St. Ignatius Wolfpack. I guess what you could say still kind of a gear up game for Bennett. You don't mind a game in the middle of the week, especially with all that break time. And we were talking outside the SHL, and I guess that does include the JV and Academic Hockey League, right? Because they're nearing the end of their league championships. Loyola JV will be taking on Lake Forest JV for the JV championship. That was all chalk all throughout. And then over in the Academic Hockey League, the semifinals are still in the works. Loyola leads over Glenbrook South 1-0, and then St. Viator leads over New Trier. Or sorry, actually they're tied with New Trier White 1-1. So still waiting on one team to even make it to the championship there. But Dylan, you said you want to talk about that JV championship and Loyola's JV and Lake Forest JV, two teams that deserve to be there.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Loyola was the number one team in the JV all year long. And then that semifinal on the other side, York and Lake Forest JV Gold, that was a really exciting one. And those teams have gotten very familiar with each other as of late because they played their first two games of the SHL. It was tied 1-1. Then they go and play their state game in Addison, and Lake Forest wins that one. And then 2 days later, they have their game three of SHL and Lake Forest wins that one. So again, the one game SHL final applies to all three levels of the Scholastic Hockey League. So Lake Forest will be at home at Heartland against I should say Loyola will be home at Heartland against Lake Forest. So that's going to be a good one. And Lake Forest JV, whatever it is about them, they've kind of been lower in the standings in the SHL, and they're now 3 years as part of this league in varsity, but their JV team always seems to have something cooking.
Good prospect pool, just like the Blackhawks, right?
Exactly right.
I was at the Blackhawks game yesterday, still frustrated about that call. I know you looked at it back, but just being there live and everybody booing the ref made me boo the ref. But I'm all for
Yeah, of
stripes.
course.
Don't get me wrong. With that
Yeah.
being said, let's take a look now at the SHL semifinal scores that happened just in the past week, and then now we get to preview the SHL final. So here we go. The SHL final is set, and we're going to tell you how we got there. Game two back on Tuesday, March 4th, happened between New Trier Trevians Green and the Glenbrook South Titans. And this was the last game of the season for Glenbrook South, knocked out against Loyola over the past weekend, and just a dominant game from New Trier Green, jumping out to a 2-0 lead. No goals were scored in the second, and then Nolan Nagets on the power play extended the lead to 3-0. Jonah Weiss found an answer, but from then it would be an empty netter. Connor Hurst and a finisher from Cooper's Cell, and New Trier is headed back once again to the SHL final, Dylan.
Yeah, 10th consecutive season, Luke, that they've
My
made
gosh.
the SHL final. The last time they missed was back in 2014 when they got swept in the semis by Loyola Gold. So this game, 5-1 score, both games of the series had the same score, 5-1, but it is really a tale of two games. This one was a lot closer throughout. New Trier scored two goals separated by just about 2 minutes there in the first period. Zach Hipsch and Connor Herstrip. And then it was 2-0 for a long time, all the way until the third period where they take a 3-0 lead on the power play goal by Nolan Nagets. And like you said, Luke, Jonah Weiss gets one more back to make it 3-1. But then the empty netter by Connor Herstrit, and just to make it a little bit worse for the Titans, a breakaway goal by Cooper Sell, and he buries that one. So 5-1 is your final score, but this was a lot closer than game one. But at the end of the day, it was a dominant performance by New Trier. Anyway, they led shots 35-19, and they've got a date in the SHL final.
Yeah, and I'm just there's a couple of moments I just looked like outside and just thought like New Trier, the last time they didn't make the SHL final, the Blackhawks didn't even win their third Stanley Cup in
Right.
5 years. I mean, that's pretty crazy. That's
2014 was a
when
long time ago.
you think of that, I was 9 years old.
That's crazy.
My goodness. Other game, game three, came right after. It was yesterday, actually. Most of you probably saw it on YouTube as we broadcasted game three on SHL Network. And this, a balanced attack from the Glenbrook North Spartans, a goal in each period. We knew these two defenses were going to shine, but it's the Spartans with their true season on the line, able to find two goals from Josh Robb, who ends up getting the game winner. And then adding on was Thomas Hendrickson in the third period. So, although it's definitely not all chalk in the state tournament, we've got a chalk final between the number one New Trier Trevians and number two Glenbrook North Spartans.
Yeah, chalk final, Luke, but the playoffs themselves were
Oh
anything
no.
but chalk, especially in the
Yep.
quarterfinals. But you're right. At the end of the day, it is going to be the one seed versus the two seed. And GBN gets some redemption here from state, and it's something that we talk about, and it was one of our questions of the week. How seriously is the state tournament compared to the SHL playoffs? Well, you look at a team like GBN, Evan Polakidis, the head coach, he's the president. This is his last year behind the bench with Glenbrook North Hockey, and this is a league he's pretty much been running for all this time, and he hasn't made the championship. You talk about New Trier last time they missed 2014. GBN, the last time they were there was 2015. So out of all these years, Lakitis has been unable to lead his club to the SHL final until this year here in his final season with Glenbrook North. I think it's really fitting. And, you talk about New Trier GBN. Well, we were robbed of the conclusion of their third game in the SHL regular
Yeah.
season. They got suspended and then ultimately canceled when it was determined it wouldn't make a difference in the standings. So now we are going to see that third SHL meeting in full between these two teams. And you got the Scholastic Cup on the line. And, you know, again, New Trier is fighting for state, but for GBN, this is one more game on the season to try and win the Scholastic Hockey League for the third time in their program history.
It's so emotional for that program. You talk about a historic coach like Evan Pulikitis, who has been around for 14 years, playing in what will be win or loss his last game, in the Spartan jacket, and also Ben Stein. I mean, he just posted on social media how about he was on the ice after game three, and because it's the last home game, no matter what, for GBN in that game three. And thankfully, they got to enjoy the win for their sake. But Ben Stein reflected on it and said, 25 years. And now next year, it's going to be so weird being at the Northbrook Sports Center, either not being a player or being a coach. It's crazy to think that way. So a lot of emotion backed behind the Spartans, and what's typically an SHL final not as highly anticipated as the state championship. I think that definitely adds some ingredients for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So the SHL final it's gonna again if you've been following some of the other leagues and you haven't followed the SHL as of late, it is just that one game, no best two out of three series, and it's really quite an event. You've got the all SHL teams players come. There's a really nice pregame ceremony, and it's just in general a really good night to celebrate the league as opposed to the entire state, and of course crown a champion. And Luke, state tournament, right, is one tournament. This SHL championship is something that spans 6 months in time, right? The
Yeah.
entire regular season is all about making the SHL playoffs and then getting to the championship. I mean, it really is a huge honor to win something like this. You've won the SHL, the whole thing that you've been playing the entire season for. So, yeah, it's going to be a spectacle.
I thought somebody just opened my door. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. I'm here at Harper College recording this episode. And with that being said, let's take a look at now our question of the week and trivia question to close things out here on episode number 23. And with that, we just have the question of the week and trivia question left. But real quick, we just want to say the SHL final is going to be sometime next week. We're telling you what we know. Nothing is truly confirmed except sometime next week. And the two teams, of course, the New Trier Trevines and the Glenbrook North Spartans. Of course, if you want to stay in the loop, you can always go to the scholastichockeyleague.org website or follow SHL Network on Instagram. But now let's talk question of the week. We have three divisions, the red division, the combined division, and the girls division. Out of those three, and we want you guys to comment. All right, we're going to have a bribe for you as we approach our trivia question. But let's talk question of the week first. What is your most anticipated semifinal game, or what would you bring your popcorn to? Or maybe even word it this way: if you could watch one game, only one out of all these semifinal games, what would it be, Dylan?
Well, I think I'm going to share this answer with a lot of people, but I gotta say Loyola and Bennett. I mean, after what we saw Bennett do against GBN, they're no longer. I mean, we say they're the dark horse, right? But they're no longer that real underdog. They're one of these four teams, and they can win it just as easily as anyone could. And they're playing a seed lower than the team that they just beat in Loyola, who's the number three seed. So you know, you look at a team like Loyola, who hasn't been to the state championship game since 2019, in spite of how historic that program has been. It's kind of hard to believe. And then on the other side, you've got Bennett, who's playing in the semifinals for just the third time in their long program history. One of those teams is going to the United Center. It's just going to be a real treat to watch.
That it sure is, and I share that one with you, but I'm also drawn between that and St. Viator New Trier, as we mentioned, St. Viator winning the regular season series. So that makes me jump over to the combined division, and being a former combined player myself, I am really excited to see the Warriors and Chicago North play in the semifinals. That's a 2-3 matchup Sunday evening, and I just think there's so much revenge that Chicago North wants to serve. You lose in overtime for the second consecutive year. You still have some returning players, and I think Chicago North is going to be out for blood. Both these teams run so deep as well. You have four lines of great hockey. That is going to be fun. Almost every, actually, what am I saying? Almost every single semifinal matchup this year in the state of Illinois, every division is going to be a blast. And don't forget, you can catch all of those on SHL Network. We're carrying the semifinals and, of course, the state championship at the United Center next Sunday. Of course, if you're not there in person, we recommend you join us any day at West Meadows or next Sunday at the United Center. Before we get into our trivia question, we do have something to bribe you guys. I know we haven't gotten a lot of comments lately, but we're plugging this one out to the SHL Network social media. And with that being said, we need 25 comments from 25 different people on the question of the week or trivia question. And then we will wear suits for our state championship preview episode
Absolutely.
next week. You can answer either the question of the week that we just discussed if you want to rewind back to that one, or the trivia question that I'm about to lay down, which is although New Trier has won the last God knows how many championships, when is the last time they have had a singular scoring champion in the SHL? Of course, we always talk about how they have a balanced attack, and it's not as how do I say this? It's not what you think it would be, that's for sure. So you can find it. Just go surfing, go on a little scavenger hunt. You'll find that answer. And
We need the name. We need the name of the player as
yes,
well,
yes, of course. The
not
name
just the.
of the player. So, question of the week or trivia, we need 25 comments from 25 different people. We will wear suits. You can even tell me what color I should wear. I'm not
Yeah.
buying a new one though. You got to hit a color that I have. And
And I'll
yeah,
tell you what, you might not see my lower half. I'll throw the pants on. I'll throw the pants on. Maybe even some nice shoes as well.
I don't know if I'm doing that, to be honest with you. What they can't see, they don't know, right?
That's right.
Exactly. So that will do it on episode number 23 of the Scholastic Sit Down. It's been a blast having you guys cruise through this whole episode. I know it's been a long one, but obviously a very informative one. And we're glad you joined us. We will see you next week for our state championship previews. And you better be there in person at West Meadows Ice Arena or tuning in online because it is endless hockey coming your way. For Dylan Ward, my name is Luke Jordan. Thank you for watching this episode, and we will see you next week.